Good afternoon, and thanks to everyone for attending this special program. It has been a challenging few years. COVID played havoc on communities throughout the country. The Outer Banks was blessed with an explosion of tourists and now the challenges of an economy and world conflict. All of this does not come without the challenges. Workforce issues have been compounded by the lack of J-1 visa students, lack of community housing, which leads to a lack of employees. Our housing has reached crisis level. Without finding ways to alleviate these two issues, housing and workforce, we face an uncertain future. We must find ways to give young people the opportunities to make the Outer Banks their home, to raise families here, and continue the legacy of our community. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Griffiths. Doug is a community enthusiast and the author of 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. Doug successfully served as an elected member of the Legislative Assembly in the province of Alberta for 4 consecutive terms. Doug retired from politics in January 2015 to actively pursue his passion of helping communities, organizations, and businesses grow stronger. In his best-selling book, 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, Doug identifies challenges and opportunities that all of our communities face. The lessons that come from these stories are applicable to all types of communities, whether they are towns, organizations, or businesses. His talents include seeing through the lies we tell ourselves, overcoming bad attitudes, targeted and focused tactical planning, communicating with those who are afraid of change, and building enduring prosperity for communities. His passion lies in building strong communities because with strong communities, we have leadership that can succeed, businesses that can prosper, and families find a great quality of life. I now would like to present to you Doug Griffiths. Let's give him a hand. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you very much. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am very excited to be here. This is the second presentation of the day, but for those of you who have heard it once already before, don't worry. It's going to be just as good as it was this morning, okay? I've done this thousands of times, and I am just as excited every single time I do this presentation because I believe in this so fundamentally. So, and I need to clarify something about just before you get worried. I was in politics back in Canada for 13 years. I resigned on purpose to go back to this. But don't worry, I've been through rehab. I'm fully recovered. So no politics, okay? All right, so a little more about my background so you understand how we got here. I grew up in one small town, and I went off to university. I was going to go to law school. I got an honors degree in philosophy and then realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. But I also was sent off because I was one of those kids that had really good grades. There were 3 choices in the town I grew up in. You could work in the oil patch and make lots of money if that's what you were into. You could take over the farm and make no money but work really hard if that's what you were into. Or if you were smart, you went off to university and did big things. And I had good grades, so I went off to the city, and then I realized I didn't want to be in the big city. I didn't want to do big things in the city. I wanted to be back in my town doing big things. So I got a teaching degree, so I went home and I became a junior high teacher. I made enough money to subsidize my ranching habits, so I could keep making money to buy more cows and more horses, and life was great. I lived in one town. On the other end, the other town, I ranched, and on the other town, I taught. So I had 3 towns, and I had the perfect life. And then I realized all 3 towns were dying. Like, people were moving out, housing prices were in decline, businesses were closing, young people were leaving. They were desperate, and it was a frightening situation. So I started to talk about the need for a rural community development strategy for the province of Alberta. Yes, I'm from Canada. Don't worry, I've been through rehab for that too. No, thank you very much. All right. That's the first time that's ever happened. So I shot my mouth off about the need for a rural community development strategy, and the next thing I knew, I was in the provincial legislature. I campaigned on the need for a rural development strategy. And the premier at the time said to me, you campaigned on the need for this, go write one. So there are 422 communities in Alberta. I went to over 200 of them in the first couple of years, talking to people about what we needed. And I wrote a report called Land of Opportunity. And in that report, there were 72 recommendations that covered health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts and culture, water, wastewater infrastructure, housing. You name it, it was in the report. And people loved it. I actually had people come up to me and say, this is amazing. This is like the new rural Bible. I love it. And I was like, man, I'm not Jesus. But thank you very much. And then the premier read it, equivalent of your governor, and he said, go tell everyone about it again. Now sell it. So I traveled around Alberta again, telling everyone what they needed to do about health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts, culture, water, wastewater infrastructure, housing. And people said, this is great. And then I realized I had a problem. Because everyone said, yes, this is great, I want to do this, but people weren't doing it. And that's when I had what I call my second epiphany. See, my first epiphany came when I was a junior high teacher. I would go talk to high school students about how to be successful. It was a pretty plain presentation. I'd show up at the front of the room and I'd say, all right, you want to be successful? It's pretty easy. Study hard, don't do drugs, marry someone nice. And they'd all look at me like, yeah, I know, my mom told me that this morning. None of them changed their behavior. So I changed my presentation. When I had an epiphany, I walked into the classroom one day and I looked out at everyone and boom, it hit me. I said, I want you to describe to me what it would look like if you ruined your life. Now they're high school students. So it would take a second for them to, warm up. But then someone would say something like, well, what do you mean? If I'm 40 years old and I ruin my life, I'm like, perfect. What would it look like? And they said, well, I'd be a drug addict. So I'd write that on the board. Somebody else would say, I'd fail out of school, then I couldn't take care of my family. Like, great, I wrote it on the board. Somebody else would say, well, I'd get pregnant or get someone prematurely pregnant. It might not ruin my life, but it might set me back. Whatever they came up with, I wrote on the board. And then I'd ask them, I want you to pretend that that's your goal. You want to ruin your life. How would you start today? Now, they're high school students again, right? So it would take a minute for them to warm up, but I'd say, how would you get to be a drug addict? What would you do today? And someone would put up their hand and say, I'd smoke a joint after school, and two kids would turn red because that's what they did yesterday, right? I'd say, oh, you want to fail out of school. How would you start today? And somebody would say, I would fail the math test we have this afternoon, and then they'd all look at me like, are you done? I got to go study. Right? Oh, you want to get pregnant or get someone pregnant. How would you start today? And then they'd all turn red, and that would sort of be the end of the class because it wasn't sex ed. The point was, every single one of those students had hopes and dreams and goals and ambitions for the future. Every single one of them. But every single one of them made decisions every day that undermined those goals. They threw away what they wanted most for what they wanted now. I mean, not one single student wants to become a drug addict. But they start somewhere until suddenly they realize they're too far down the path that they really wanted to take. It's gone. No one wants that kind of life. And so you could see all their eyes light up. And I even had parents come to me and say, wow, I don't know what you said, but it changed the hell out of my kids. I even had one set of parents, their kid told them what I'd said and what we talked about. And the parent said, we made some changes in our lives. Because everyone does stuff that sabotages their own success. And so that was my first epiphany, and it worked really well. And then my second epiphany came when I was talking to communities about how to be successful. Remember? Yeah. Economic development, community, yeah. I was going to go through the list, and then I just blanked for a second. Sorry. Health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts, culture, water, wastewater infrastructure, housing. Okay, so I was going through that list, and they were doing things that sabotaged their goals. And so I just made a little list. I think it started at 20, went down to 10, eventually worked out at 13, of 13 ways people were killing their communities. And that's where I started. I was on my way to a community to give the presentation about what to do, and I thought, I got to talk about this, and it became a book. You got to know, I did not write this book to become a national bestseller. I wrote this book for therapy. Because I was really frustrated helping communities and watching them sabotage their own success. Frustrated enough, I wrote the stories down. And that's how it became a book. So welcome to my therapy session. Ready? Oh, wait, there's a couple of things you need to know. No matter what you think I'm talking about in this, it all comes down to attitude, 1. 2, if you're offended, that's your problem, not mine. Honestly, there are people who laugh, and it's okay to laugh because some of these stories are funny. There's some people who look a little frustrated. When I look in their eye, they're like, I know who he's talking about. When I get home, he's going to get it. And then there are other people that cross their arms the entire time and glare at me. And I can see they're saying, how dare you talk about me like that? Because we're all in this. And we're all in this. When you'll see when I get to chapter 8 about seniors, my wife's parents live with us. They have for 16 years. It's a joyous time, and I'm a good son-in-law. But you know what? Sometimes I get frustrated with them, and my wife looked at me the other day and said, you're being in chapter 8. We all do this. Yes. It is not meant to be critical. It is meant to point out what you're doing that is ruining your community. And the goal is not to chastise you or berate you. The goal is to get you to change so that we can make our community successful. Because deep down, I quit politics and went back to doing this because I believe building strong communities is the most important job on earth. Because like it said in the introduction, if we have strong communities, then families can take care of themselves and each other, businesses are prosperous, and leadership is successful. And I encourage every level of government to go back to focusing. When I started in politics, I was interested in federal politics and international relations, realized it has very little bearing on my life, went down to provincial politics, and then eventually left that so I could work on community building because that has the biggest impact on our lives. So, ready? Okay, yeah. Thanks. All right. All right, number 1, forget the water, both the quality and the quantity. Now, I wrote the first edition of this book in 2010, and I actually thought I can take this chapter out when I rewrote it in 2016. Because this is the 21st century. We don't have to worry about water anymore. And then Flint, Michigan happened. And you remember Flint, Michigan. I mean, and you know what happened in Flint, Michigan? A bunch of elected officials in Flint got in an ego fight with a bunch of elected officials in Detroit, and they said, well, we're not going to have them tell us how much we're going to pay for our water and tell us how to manage our water system, and we're going to do it ourselves. So they pulled out of the Detroit water agreement, and they turned on their old system, and 12 people died because there was contamination in the lines. And so then they got all that cleaned up. They paid the fines. They even paid some of the lawsuits. And then they turned it on again. And then they found out they had old lead pipes. And so they had lead contamination in the water. Eventually, just a year and a half, 2 years ago, at Christmas, they finally got little water treatment systems to put under the kitchen sink so every household could finally get one tap they could access safe drinking water from. That was ridiculous. And now, because of the contamination and the lead, they're facing millions of dollars in lawsuits because children can't be exposed to that much lead, and they estimate that thousands of children have been exposed to enough lead that could cause brain damage in young children. And you know what? I thought, oh, that's Flint, Michigan. That's one political story. How bad can that be? It's one example. So I went and checked. On average, there are 30 communities in the United States every single week that are put on boil water advisories. And I'm not talking about the ones that last for an hour or for a day or two. I'm talking about the ones that last for multiple days, weeks, months, and years. And some of them do last for years. And so it is common. In fact, the 300 number, there are over 300 communities right now in the United States that have lead content in their water that was higher than Flint, Michigan had at its worst. And most of those people don't know. I thought I could take this out because this is the 21st century, but so much of this is still going on today. And I remember some words my grandpa told me when he said, if you want to really remember what's important, remember this. You can go for 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food, or you die. You can do without just about everything else. And so I used to say people all the time that people demanded good quality water. I don't say that anymore because no one demands it. They just expect it. And if you don't believe me, then when we're done here, or tomorrow morning, go to your favorite gas station and just hang out by the counter, buy a cup of coffee, and listen to the conversations. You will hear everyone complain about paying $4 for a gallon of gasoline, 1 gallon of gasoline, that will move a 2,000-pound vehicle 35 miles down the road. But no one will say a word about paying $2 for a little bottle of water like this because people expect quality water. They won't complain about it, but if you can't provide it, they'll go somewhere where they can get it because it's just that important in the 21st century. But quality of water isn't the only issue. Quantity of water is important too. I mean, I grew up on a farm, right? I know not many of you necessarily are associated with agriculture, but the rule of thumb on the farm was that you buy the best quality seeds money can buy. You put them at the perfect depth so they grow. You put on herbicides to kill the weeds. You put on pesticides to kill the bugs. You put on fertilizer so it has nutrients. And you know what you get if it doesn't rain? Nothing. You can't do agriculture without water. You can't do value-added agriculture without water. You can't do commercial development without water, industrial production without water. You can't build homes without water. And in fact, there are hundreds of communities all around North America, Canada and the US, where people want to buy a lot, build a house, put their family in there, start a business, build the economy, and have a life, and they can't because we can't supply that lot with enough water. Water is a critical issue. And I have some colleagues, because I'm from Alberta, we have the oil sands, right? Tar sands, some people call it. So we have discussions sometimes about, what happened there? We have discussions sometimes about what's important, and they say to me, the next world war will be fought over oil. That's what they say. Doug, the next world war will be fought over oil because it's so important to the economy. I agree, it might be. The last world war will be fought over water because whoever controls water controls everything. So if you want to kill your community, forget the water, both the quality and the quantity. And your community will drink from a poison well or it will die of thirst, but either way, it will die. Number 2, don't attract businesses, especially businesses that compete with yours. Now, I said that I traveled all over Alberta working in communities. I discovered that when I was a politician and I showed up in a suit at the front of the room, people would tell me what they wanted me to hear. But when I put on my boots and my sport coat and I walked around Main Street, people said the things that needed to be said. And those are two different things, always. So I spent a lot of time walking around the street talking to people. And I found this out. I would go to communities of about 2,000 people with one grocery store. And I would talk to the grocery store owner and say, how are things going? And they'd say, I don't know, Doug. I don't know if we can keep this going. I mean, we're doing okay now, but sometimes it's week to week. And I just don't know if this is something we can do for the rest of our lives. But I would go to communities of the same population, 2,000 people, with 2 grocery stores, and I would ask the grocery store owners, tell me about your business. And they'd say, good. I mean, I'm not buying a Maserati and the kids aren't going to Harvard, but we make a good living doing this. And it was almost invariably that way. And I couldn't figure out why. 2 grocery stores with 2,000 people, they get half the business. 2,000 people with 1 grocery store, they get all the business. Why would they be failing and they'd be successful? And then it struck me, competition. Competition gives us price, quality, selection, service, atmosphere, experience, a whole host of things. And so when you had competition in this community, I would ask people to tell me about their grocery stores, and they'd say things like, well, you know, I go into that one because they have the best price on canned goods, but sometimes I go into that one because they have the best quality meat. Others would say, well, I go into that one because they have the best selection of produce, but sometimes I go into that one because the bag boys carry the groceries out for me. Price, quality, selection, service. But I would go to the community with 1 grocery store and I would ask the owners or the people to tell me about that grocery store, and they would say something different all the time. They would say, well, I want to shop local. I know how important it is. I want to go in there. But I mean, I go in there and a jug of milk is $2 more than anywhere else. And half the time it's going to expire. And then that's no good to me. And then sometimes I go in there and say, hey, would you get this for me? Bring it in for me? And they say, are you kidding? Do you think I can afford to bring something in just for you? There's no way I can possibly afford to do that. In fact, sometimes I go into the store and the owner looks at me like, I'm stocking shelves right now. What do you want? So I just leave. And where do you think they go? Thank you. They go.
I don't think he needs it. Anybody?
We okay?
Not that voice.
Thanks. Where do you think they go? They go down the road to the community with 2 grocery stores where there's competition that gives them better price, quality, selection, and service. That's where the money goes to. Now, I was in a community. Which story was I going to tell? Sorry. Oh, yeah. I was in a community doing a interviews and survey to figure out how the community was. And I met this really interesting couple. They were a young couple. Well, that was back when I was young, too. We were the same age. And they owned a gas station. And I thought, this is going to be a fascinating story. I want to know how they did this and what came about. And so I interviewed them. And unfortunately, it turned out nothing in their story was interesting, except one thing. They said, just casually mentioned, their hometown was an hour down the road. I said, well, why wouldn't you have opened your gas station in your hometown? You guys were both there. Why didn't you do that? They only have one, they need another. And they said, oh, we tried. We tried, but we couldn't get the building permits, we couldn't get the development permits, we couldn't get the zoning. I mean, eventually the town quit returning our phone calls. So we just moved down the road, built the gas station. It took a year. They ignored us for a whole year. I asked them why, and they didn't know. So I went to that town because I wanted to find out, and I asked everyone because I wanted the truth. I wanted to get all the stories. Well, everyone had the exact same story, and they all knew why they couldn't open that gas station. That couple didn't know, but everybody else did. They all looked at me embarrassingly and kind of shamed and said, well, you know, the mayor at the time owned the Shell gas station across the street from where they wanted to build and didn't want the competition. Now, because I had asked so many people, I heard other stories too. People would say, oh, that's not the first time. There was another couple that wanted to open a bumper-to-bumper franchise, an auto parts store. They had the same problem. So they moved an hour down the road in the other direction. And I said, well, why? And everyone told me because one of the counselors at the time managed the Acklands Granger store, another parts store, and didn't want the competition. Now, I had to ask so many questions. I started to hear a lot of stories. I actually started to feel like a Catholic priest on Sunday. I heard, no joke, I was sitting at a table having lunch in the community after talking to people for a few days, and a lady came in and sat down, and she said, can I talk to you? I have to get something off my chest. I was like, confession starts now, I guess, sure. And she said, I was the front person at the town office for over 20 years, and people would come in to me all the time and say, because we were an industrious community, they'd say, I'm a welder, I want to buy some industrial land, I'm going to build a welding shop, hire a bunch of welders, it's really great, the economy's doing well, I want to do that. And she'd say, we have no industrial land for sale, or it's environmentally contaminated, you won't want that, or the housing prices are inflated, or the economy's in the downturn, or the school's full of drugs, whatever she could do to make them leave. And I looked at her across the table and said, why would you do that? And she said, because my husband was a welder and we didn't want the competition. Now, I heard these stories all over the place, all in one community. And I got to tell you, this community believes it's open for business. It will tell you, we are open for business. We believe in the economy. But if I could pack you all up in a crystal ball and take you to that community and put you in this on the podium so you could watch, and I would call a town hall meeting and the whole town would show up. And I'd say, do you believe in business? And they'd say, yes, Doug, we are good conservatives. We believe in the power of the economy. We believe in business, except that's a lie. Because if you don't hold on to that when you're the one being competed against, then that's not a value, that's a hobby. And you don't really believe it. It means it's worthless. So if you want to kill your community, don't attract businesses, especially ones that compete with yours, and you can have a monopoly on failure. No? Thought that was a good one. All right. Thanks. All right, number 3, don't engage youth. I'm going to tell you this right now because people ask me this all the time. They say, Doug, how do we keep young people in our community? When you ask me that, my first impression is that I'll go to your community and I'll see young people chained up to mailboxes and light posts so they can't get out of town, right? How do we keep them here? That's the wrong approach. What you need is not to keep them. The nature of youth is not to stay. The nature of youth is to go off exploring, to go meet new people, to glean new ideas, to have new experiences, to experiment with some stuff. You hope it's not bad stuff, but that's the nature of youth. Your key to success is not to keep them. It's to give them a reason to come home after they're done exploring. But we don't do that. In fact, most of the time, we don't not only give them no reason to come home, we spend half of our energy chasing them out of town. I grew up on a farm. My dad said for the first 21 years of my life, son, you don't want to farm. Man, there's no money in this, and it's a lot of hard work. When everyone else is going camping on the weekend, you're going to be working. You're going to work all summer where they're down at the lake. Land prices are going up, fertilizer prices are going up, gas prices are going up, equipment prices are going up, but our commodities don't go up. You'll never make a living at this, son. You're going to die working hard and going broke. Don't do it. I came back from university with my first degree. 21 years old, and he sat me down at the table and looked at me and said, so, want to take over the farm? No, I'm serious. And then he had the gall to look surprised when I said no. He was like, what do you mean? It's a great... But we do that. I did take over the farm, by the way, but sucker I am. But we do that. In fact, I was at another event. It was much like this. It was a lunchtime soup and sandwich. Everyone got their bowl of soup and their sandwich, and they all sat down. I was going to do a half-hour presentation on how to rejuvenate your main street, especially through COVID and things that were coming. And so everybody was kind of excited, but nobody knew who I was. So I was wandering around at the tables listening, just dressed like this. I took the jacket off, and I heard everyone in the room saying, I don't know, I don't think this is going to work. There's no hope in this community. Our downtown's dying, our main street's dying, businesses are closing, and on it went. One guy in particular, a very boisterous guy, sat in the middle of a room full of semi-retirees, young entrepreneurs, high school students, university returnees. It was an eclectic mix of people. And he sat right in the middle of the room and said, I don't want to know what the point of this is. We didn't do what the last fancy speaker told us to do. What makes anyone think we're going to listen to this guy? And our businesses are closing and Main Street's dying and our subdivision's still not sold out. What's the point? Young people need to go to the city if they're going to have any opportunities because we don't have anything here. So I did my presentation. I said, any questions? And I picked him out because he stood up after. First question, and he said, yeah, what do we have to do to keep young people in our community? And my response was, shut up. No word of a lie, I was never politically correct. I said, you're being way too negative. Not just you, all of you are being far too negative and too critical. Yeah, and then you're wondering why young people leave when you tell them there's no hope and no future here. You've got to change your story. You've got to change the negativity, or you're going to suck the life out of everything that you're trying to do. But it's not good enough just to try and give them a reason to come home. You better make it worth their time, worth their while. But we often don't do that. I mean, here's some advice for young people. Number one, they don't believe you unless you ask them 7 times. No one does. It's actually a psychological condition that we don't believe things until we hear them 7 times. It's why politicians repeat things over and over and over. Trust me, I know. And you've all seen it. I mean, you'll get up in the morning and you'll hear something at 8 o'clock in the morning. And you'll think to yourself, that is ludicrous. That's absurd. There's no way that's true. Then you'll hear it again at 9. And you'll hear it again at 10. You'll hear it at lunch. You'll hear it at 2. You hear it at 4. You get home and you hear it again. And you look at your spouse and go, maybe there's some truth to that. Nothing changed. No new information, no new facts. You just heard it over and over and over, and so then you start to believe it's true. And it's an actual psychological condition. And young people are the same. Trust me, I have 2 teenage boys, 13 and 16. I say, take the garbage out. I have to say it 7 times. I'm just joking. They do it now, but they used to look at me like, I didn't think you were serious the first 6. And so we're all like that. And so I always encourage people, ask them. And when you say, they don't want to be involved, you probably said, hey, would you like to be involved? No? Well, yeah, I'll talk to you later. And then you never talk to them again. You're like, hey, they don't want to be engaged. They don't want to be involved. I mean, next time you have a breakfast event, go sit with them and go be part of the group. Take someone with you so you don't look creepy, okay? Just a little advice. But break it up. Don't sit with the crowd you already know. Go talk to other people that you don't know, outsiders, young people, semi-retirees. Bridge some of those gaps. Advice number 2, 3 levels of engagement. We have a tendency, especially leadership, has a tendency to ask people the first level of engagement. That's when you invite people in and say, what's the problem? You tell them the problem, and they say, thank you very much. We consulted. And then they're done. And young people can see right through that. You're just there to say, hey, we talked to the young people, and we didn't like what they had to say, but we listened. The second level of engagement is when you invite them in and you say, tell me your issues and tell me what you think we should do about it. Some solutions. Still, they can see through that, and then you're like, thank you very much. We can't afford that, and I'm busy with other things. And so it goes away. The third level of engagement, the meaningful one, is when you say, tell me your challenges, tell me your solutions, tell me what I can do to help you fix them. Do you need a budget? Do you need power? And give it to them. Let them own it and fix it themselves. Especially in this day and age, we have a massive tendency to think, and I've heard leadership say this before, hey, I didn't get to be the boss until I was 40. You can wait your turn. Said the people who can't fix their own iPhone. I think we need some help with technology and the way things are changing. We need more than ever co-leadership. So you need to empower them or they won't believe you really want them, and then they won't engage. And I've heard people say they won't come out for the consultation. That's because you asked them 3 times last time and never did anything about it. They're not wasting their time for your ego or to satisfy your public engagement requirements. Make it meaningful or don't do it at all. And the last one, they live in a gig economy. I mean, my parents' generation probably were the ones that were told, hey, you're going to get a job, you're going to work at it for 50 years, and then you get a gold watch, and then you can die. Congratulations. That same younger generation was told, hey, you're going to graduate from university, and you're going to go get a job, and it's going to be great. And then they got out of university, and they were told, I'm sorry, I don't have a job for the rest of your life. I have a contract, a contract for you on one project you can work on. Oh, and by the way, your education is not up to date. I mean, things have changed so much. You're using textbooks and technology and programs from 5 years ago. It's way out of date. So we're going to have to teach you a little bit more and upgrade you. I mean, my theory is that 4-year degrees are going to slowly become obsolete because we're going to have to learn constantly because things are changing so fast. And so they were told, 1, you're not qualified, and 2, there is no job. So now they work gig economies, they educate and train themselves, and they're constantly upgrading, and now they're used to it, and they like it. I'm in a gig economy. All of these speaking gigs and consulting are all gig by gig. I don't have a full-time job. I'm my own boss. I could never go back to working for a corporation because I don't answer to other people very well. I don't. That's why one of the reasons I love politics. I served there were 5 premiers, equivalent of governors. Every single one of them was mad at me at some point, and I really liked it. I don't work well in that. I like creativity, and our team is absolutely amazing and embraces that too. So that's the way they live. Now, that gig workforce has changed as well. They have gig relationships. They also gig volunteer. So I have heard all sorts of people say, well, I would like some volunteering from these people. They don't care about our community. They don't come and join the Elks or the Rotary or whatever other service club we have. No, they very much are concerned about community. They're just not wanting to volunteer the way you volunteered. Just like they don't want to join a corporation for 50 years, they don't want to sign up to go to a meeting the 3rd Thursday of every month for the next 20 years for an organization. But you give them a cause, a gig to work on, and they will work on it. One of my favorite examples is a young man who was in a community here in the United States who went to his town to ask permission because he wanted to clean up one of the parks in his small community. And the town said, I think that's a great idea. Well, we should probably give you the garbage bags. We might have to set a budget for that. And I mean, we better check our insurance because if you break your arm or something while you're doing this, we don't want liability. And you know what? Other people have a right to come and clean up the park too. We should make it a day and have everyone come. We could even maybe have a band. We better get a budget. And by the time they were done, they said, come back in 6 months, we'll have it sorted out. And he walked out of there, basically said, you sort it out, and went to the park that weekend and cleaned it up anyway. And he brought other people along. He created on Instagram a hashtag. It's like clean my community or clean up my community, something like that. And it went viral. Thousands and thousands of young people from the US and Canada went and cleaned up their park to imitate what he had done. And it was one of the biggest cleaning days North America has ever seen in its town, and not one council supported it. Because these folks, these young people who work in a gig economy, who work online in environments, who work in flat environments where there's no title, don't care if your title is mayor or city manager or president or prime minister. They don't care. They don't care about titles at all. They care about getting something done and being responsive. And so my advice to many councils is, who say, how can we be more effective? My advice is always, you should be worried about how to be more responsive or you're going to become irrelevant. That's because these young people will get things done. So there's my advice on young people. But hey, they think different, they do different things, they value different things, and they're going to change the world. And lots of older generations criticize them for it. Just like the generation before them criticized you and vice versa. Everybody thinks the next generation doesn't have the capacity. I have more faith in the upcoming generations than I've ever had because I do believe they're community builders and I've seen it firsthand. But hey, if you want to kill your community, forget the youth. Don't engage them. Just keep playing with them so that you can say you did public consultation, and eventually they'll become so disenfranchised they won't care about your community or organization. They'll go somewhere where they are appreciated. And because youth is synonymous with the future, when they leave, your future will leave with them. Number 4, deceive yourself. This essentially means having absolutely no idea who you are. And I have my favorite way, least favorite way, the most popular way. Communities deceive themselves is to pretend they're perfect. I started surveying what communities had for vision statements and mission statements and slogans on the West Coast. I got to Idaho and I quit because 54% of all communities in North America at that point had the best place to work, live, and raise a family. Isn't that a great slogan? It's absolutely meaningless too because it's not true. I mean, it's called over-marketing, where you promise to deliver something you can't possibly deliver. There's no community on earth that's perfect. You guys love yours? It's not perfect either. But it's over-marketing. So if I say, I got that new iPhone, I want to sell it to you. It's great. It does video chats, it does video conferencing, checks your email, plays music. It even keeps track of where you are and sends it to the press. Wait, I shouldn't have told you that. And you're looking at me like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, it'll also wash your car when you're busy. You know, do something like that. You're like, oh, well, now you're lying. And the second you lie about one thing, oversell it, everything becomes a lie. And so when communities say the best place to work, live, and raise a family, it's a lie. No one is perfect. And it misses the most important point. Being perfect is not what draws people to you. It's what makes you unique that draws people to you. It's just like people. Yeah, we admire perfect people, but we don't want to hang out with them because they're too perfect. And they're not perfect anyway. But who we love is based on what unique attributes they have that touches our hearts. That's what sells a community. Oh, I got to read you these stats. But too often, we lie to ourselves about who we really are. And so we say the best place to work, live, and raise a family. And it applies to people too. A few stats. 74%, this is surveys done, 74% of people believe they are better drivers than the average person. 81% of people believe they are better parents than the average person. 68% believe they are better looking than the average person. And 74% believe they are better in bed. Yeah, I know. I mean, how can we all be above average? Somebody is lying to themselves, right? And yet communities do that all the time. So, I did have one more story. The part that most communities miss that they're lying to themselves about is that economic development is separate from community building. I hear that all the time. I'm guilty of it. We used to do an economic strategic plan for a community or a community strategic plan, and now we don't. They go together. And it's because you can't separate them. And the pandemic has just amplified that and confirmed it. I mean, how many of you know how, daycare? We discuss daycare in Canada all the time. We're not communists. We have socialized medicine, and now we have a daycare program, but we're pretty business savvy. Yeah, you're with me. Okay, good. All right. So we saw during the pandemic that the second one child had a sniffle or sneezed, you had to close the daycare down. Well, what happened? All those people who were dropping their kids off now can't go to work. That impacted the businesses, and it just spread like wildfire. Social issues and economic issues are inseparable, and I have proof for that. I was in a community in Minnesota with my colleague Heather, and we were doing an economic development strategy for the community. We're going to give them some advice. Because this community of 2,500 people had $10 million. They had a big industry that shut down because it wasn't economical. So they gave them $10 million to help the community transition. And the state was going to give them some too. So they had $10 million. They were giving $700,000 a year to the golf course to keep it operational and viable for marketing. They were giving out loans. They gave $100,000 to a Mexican restaurant. Their basement flooded and they were going to close. And they said, no, here's $100,000, reopen it, repaint it, do whatever you want, stay open for 10 years, you don't even have to pay us back. It was a beautiful community with a vibrant main street, great housing, and there was housing available, and it was quality, and it was affordable. There were small manufacturers all around the community who told us that they couldn't even grow because there was no one to hire, but they had demand for growth. It was all there, and yet nothing was happening. So they asked us to do the evaluation. And we were in the school. I was going to talk to the students and do my 13 Ways Kids Ruin Their Lives presentation, high school students do. And we went, they had a small daycare at the front of the school in the basement. There must have been 8 near babies there. And when we were there, one mom brought in her child because her C-section stitches ripped, but she had no childcare and there was nowhere else to go, and it was an emergency situation and she had to go back to work. So Heather had said, when we did the analysis, you subsidize the people who worked at this daycare. There were 2 of them. They got $7.50 an hour. If you worked at the grocery store, you got 14. So she said, if you're going to do something, train them, educate them, and pay them a decent wage, like compete with the grocery store. And you have a bond issued already for a new school, so add a daycare onto the school if they're willing to build it, and you supply the people and offer daycare, not free, subsidized or anything, just access to daycare to your community. And they said, that is not economic development, you may go now. So we left. Well, the newspaper gentleman liked our pitch and kept writing about it till the school board showed up at the town office and said, hey, we actually want to build a daycare if you supply the people. And so they did. And that community has grown. New people moved in for access to the daycare, which allowed new manufacturers to hire new people and allowed them to expand, which brought in new developers because they needed more housing. And they're having a boom. And no one believes me about this, and I wasn't even sure about it myself until I spoke in Las Vegas at the NATCO conference. No, the NATO conference. National Association of County Officers, right? Something like that. Yeah, okay. So I spoke there, and I had to meet after with a representative from each of the 50 states to talk about the future, this other presentation. I talked about Minnesota and this community, and I could see them going, yeah, sure, buddy. Until the representative from Minnesota stood up and said, actually, because of what happened in that community with daycare and economic growth, we've added daycare to our statewide economic development strategy. So lots of people think economic development is about the lowest taxes and least regulations. Garbage. It's about picking places people want to live now. Because my parents used to move to where the jobs were. Now the jobs move to where people want to live. Quality communities. But you've got to deal with all those issues that are often forgot about around economic development. Like daycare, like quality of life, like housing, right? And if you don't, you're not going to choose your own destiny, and you're deceiving yourself about what your issues are and how to overcome them. Number 5, shop elsewhere. Every single chambers of commerce in the free world tells people, shop local. We know how valuable and how important that is, right? I mean, when I did my MBA a few years ago, there's an economic principle that says every dollar spent in the community touches 7 other hands before it leaves, on average. So if I spend money in your business, you spend it, it winds up in your hands. You spend it, you get it. 7 other people touch it. It's like having $7 for every $1 you actually have. But if you spend the money out of your community, it's gone. And odds are it's not going to come back. So we know how important it is to shop local. But local people don't, even though we know it and we say it, we don't follow that because we let emotions get in the way. Here's the 3 phases of a business opening in your community. Now, if you're an outsider and new starting a business, I'll get to you in chapter 11. But if you lived in the town your whole life and you're starting a business, this is what happens to you. Phase number 1. You invest all your net worth and your equity into starting that business. It's going to be really exciting. I mean, you're going to hire a bunch of people. You're going to grow your own net worth. You're going to donate money to the basketball team and to the school, and you're going to employ people and grow the economy. It's going to be wonderful. And in the coffee shop, the most evil place on earth, where nothing positive is ever said and very little truth is ever spread, they start to talk. And they say things like, what a stupid idea. I can't believe somebody would invest all of their money to open a business like that. Our economy is not big enough to support a business like that. And so if I buy my stuff from there, who's going to service my products? Where am I going to get my parts? What if I need a replacement? No, that's a stupid idea. And everyone in the coffee shop looks at them and goes, yeah, dumb idea. And so no one shops there, and the business goes broke. Phase 2 comes along only if the business owner can survive that phase. And they do okay then. You get through that, you start to do okay. Actually, lots of times if you get through that phase, you start to do pretty well. You might do really well. And then the coffee shop banter changes. Suddenly then it's, they're building a new house in the new subdivision. They bought a new car. Did you see the new clubs he's got down the golf course? She's wearing these big new rings. They're making too much money, those greedy business owners. And they will actually drive 20 miles down the road to another business because they don't have to see that owner's car or house or rings or clubs. And that money leaves town. And you know what that's based on? Envy. And envy is the second most evil of all human traits because it's self-destructive. I mean, imagine Your house is bigger than mine, your car is bigger than mine, you're a successful business owner, and I don't like it. I don't like how much money you're making, so I talk to my friends in the coffee shop, and we don't shop there, and that's enough to make you go broke. Yay for me. Yay. I don't have to be jealous of you anymore, except your house is bigger than mine, so we're going to come after you next. And as soon as I'm done with you, I'm feeling empowered, so you're up. And then there's you. And then there's anyone else in here whose car or house is bigger than mine. Anyone who makes more money than I do. Yay! I have no one to be jealous of. Except what makes anyone think I'm going to have a job or a successful business if everyone else goes broke? It's self-destructive to hope your own community members fail. And yet we do it all the time. And then the third phase comes along, and the business finally does go broke. Or it gets bought up by a conglomerate and all the corporate profits leave town. Or the owner moves to another location, a bigger center down the road where they don't have to be criticized about how successful they are. And then we sit around the coffee shop and go, what do we have to do to keep a business in this community when we're the ones that chase them out? That happens all the time. So chambers say shop local, but we don't follow through with it because of our envy. Now, I don't hear any businesses ever explaining to themselves, to business owners, you know what? We have to give people a reason to want to shop locally too. Can't just expect them to all the time. You remember the mayor who owned the Shell gas station that I talked about in chapter 2? Yeah, well, he wasn't the mayor anymore, but he still owned the Shell gas station. And the community called me, and said, could you help us? He charges 5 cents a gallon premium on every gallon of gasoline because there's no competition, and he can. Could you help us? Because we're kind of scared of him. They actually said he's mean, so we were scared to talk to him. So it was easy. I collected all the data. I did a basket of goods comparison and put it up on the screen. Went to the Chamber of Commerce and showed them and said, look, you're very competitive in the entire region, in most everywhere except gasoline. There was another area too. But with the gasoline, I looked at him because he's in the room and I said, could you do us a favor? Lower the price to be competitive because people feel like they're getting gouged. They get mad, so they go down the road to shop. And when they go down the road to get gasoline, they stop at the hardware store, they stop at the grocery store, they go out for lunch. All that money leaves the community. It's hurting everyone. And he looked at me and said, no, people have a responsibility to shop locally. So I left. What else was I supposed to do? Now, I was going through the community a few years after that. And I stopped in, I was going by, I thought I'd see how he's doing. So I pulled in, and I noticed he was no longer a Shell gas, he was a racetrack gas. I didn't know the difference. So he came out, as soon as I pulled up, he said, Doug, I haven't seen you in years, this is great, how are you doing? And the first thing I said was, how come you went from a Shell gas to a racetrack gas? And he said, well, they downgraded us to another brand because we don't sell enough volume of gasoline. I was like, why don't you sell enough volume? He said, because people in this town won't shop local. And as I said it, I looked over, and he was still charging a 5 cent a gallon premium on every... He didn't even realize he wasn't just sabotaging the community's success, he was sabotaging his own success. But hey, you know what? If you want to kill your community, it doesn't matter whether you are a consumer or you are a business owner, you have got to make sure that every single dollar leaves town. And that way, your community won't just die, it can die penniless. Oh, you guys were lively. I thought there'd be a little more laughs. Number 6, don't paint. So I have people say to me all the time, Doug, I really like your presentation. I love the book. You had 12 really good ones, and then you wanted that magic number 13 for killing your community. So you added it on and then buried it in the middle so none of us would notice. Because this is really weak sauce. This is so shallow. This is so superficial. This is judging a book by its cover. Well, we put a nice cover on our book for a reason. People are attracted to the cover. It says a lot. It tells part of the story. Publishers will tell you that's why they put particular covers on their books. If you look at it, I don't even know what it means. There's a guy standing in a hole with a weather vane on his head and a cow under his arm. Like, I have no idea. But people pick it up. 13 Ways to Kill Your Community. The title acts like the biggest part of the cover because I could have written 13 strategies for building a successful community and none of you would have read it because I would have fallen asleep writing it. But you pick it up like, I wonder what this is about. I did have someone call me once and say, I hated it. I mean, who would want to kill their community? I'm like, you didn't read the book because that's not actually guide to killing your community. But so it's not just superficial. We're actually attracted to aesthetically pleasing things. We are. I mean, not one person has ever gone onto a car lot and said, I want to see the ugliest vehicle you've got. Right? Not one person has been at a wedding dance or a bar or a lounge and looked across the room and said, oh my God, he's ugly. I'm going to go ask him out. You just don't do that because you're attracted to aesthetically pleasing things. And it's not just superficial. I don't mean it to be just superficial. It's actually genetically encoded into us because the way we appear, our aesthetics, gives the impression of whether or not we're going to be successful, whether or not we take pride in who we are and what we do. And your community is the exact same way. It tells people whether you're willing to invest in your own community. It tells people whether you believe it's healthy and strong and worth the investment. I mean, if you're not going to invest in your community, why would anybody else? That's the message it sends. And we are genetically encoded into understanding this. I'll give you an example. A female cheetah comes out of the jungle into a clearing looking for a mate. It's time to find one. And there's two male cheetahs. Now this one comes out of the jungle, little swagger in his steps, looking muscular, fit, nice hair, bright eyes. Wow, right? This one comes out of the jungle limping, its tail's busted, mangy hair, skin stuck to its ribs like it hasn't eaten in weeks. Which one is she attracted to? She is not superficial, but she's attracted to this one because it looks successful. It looks like it's going to be prosperous. And our communities send the same message. Now, I have people that look at me after and go, you know what? I get it. It's important. It's still a nice to have. We're going to invest in all that internal stuff first, and we'll eventually get to that. Except you can invest in all of that over the next 10 years. Spend every dollar you have, every person hour you have, all of your energy into that. And what happens if for the next 10 years while you're doing that, everyone drives by because they don't see the beauty that you're trying to reflect? Then at the 10 years, you run out of money and it's too late. You need to do both at the same time. External and internal are equally important. But hey, you know what? Not painting, I mean, it's kind of like putting an ugly cover on your book. But eventually, no one will pick up that book to read. And eventually, that appearance, that cover of failure will become a reality. And your community can die an ugly death. Number 7, don't cooperate. So people ask me all the time, Doug, in this day and age, right now on the spot, if you had to pick one of the 13 ways that you think is most killing our communities, which would it be? Number 7, don't cooperate. I have countless examples. I was working in a community. Sorry, I find this story funny. I was working in a community. It was a county, and there were 2 towns within the municipality, within the county. And so I was working on economic development with them. They wanted to talk about a regional economic development strategy. And we were talking about social issues and everything all incorporated in there. And I was really excited. It was good. I did my presentation, and we were going to get started. And a guy from the county stood up and said, Doug, I know you say that we're friends, the townspeople and us, but you're wrong. They are not our friends. They are our enemy. They want our money so that they can build more pools, so they can build more sidewalks, so they can put up new light posts. They are the enemy. And another guy from a town stood up and looked at him and said, but doesn't your mom live in town? So I have this presentation I've changed the name to, I've seen the enemy, and it's my mom. And I've seen it countless times over and over again. There was another county that we were working in with 5 towns. Now this group had a joint fire service agreement that lasted for 20 years at least. And it was great. I mean, they basically shared their services and they all pooled their resources so they could keep the fire services running and effective and efficient. Okay? Then they withdrew because a couple of elected officials got elected and they said, my townspeople paid for that. You're not telling them how to use the fire truck. Yeah, well, my people paid for the fire hall. You're not telling them what to do with that. Well, no one's telling my volunteer firefighters what to do. And they all withdrew and tried to do it themselves. Now, the county and 5 towns together, none of them had the resources available to actually do a very good job themselves. I was working on another project with them. And they said, this fire service agreement it's collapsed. And we've got to get it back, and we have no idea how to do it because these people keep getting reelected and nobody wants to change what they're doing. They're all focused on themselves. I said, well, let me see what I could do. So I went and did some research. It was really easy, actually. It turned out of the 6 municipalities, only 3 of them had qualified firefighters that had training. Only 3 of the municipalities. Only 2 of them had anyone that had a license that could actually drive the fire truck, because you need a special license for most of these. Only 1 of them had anyone that was trained and qualified to operate the fire truck and know how the gauges all worked, and none of them had anybody that could go do fire rescue if someone was trapped in a house. None of them. I know. I was like, are you guys, we had the meeting, I explained this to them, and they said, well, I don't know what we're supposed to do about that. I said, I'll tell you how this works. You heard of Flint, Michigan? The second someone dies in a fire because your ego's got in the way and you all care about who owns the fire truck instead of the fire services you're providing, you're all going to go to jail. We had a fire service agreement in a matter of a few months because they didn't realize, they missed the point that their egos don't matter, the people they serve matter. And I don't care if it's fire departments or police departments or marketing departments or economic development departments. Everywhere I go, municipalities have pulled back and said, no, we run this. We're going to run this all by ourselves. There's no way we're working together with our neighbors. Why? So you can do a half-assed job and not get it done? Or are you going to think about the people you serve? That's what should be most important. There was another community. It was 2 towns, exactly 20 miles apart. They were 3,000 people each. 3,000 people each. As an elected official, I was asked to go observe what was going on because a new massive agricultural manufacturing facility was moving into the region. And they called a big town hall meeting with 2 communities to come together. And everyone filled the hall. It was a glorious time. High school students, university students, semi-retirees, seniors, county councils, administration, entrepreneurs, small business owners. It was exciting. She stood up there at the front and she said, look, we're going to build here somewhere in the region. We're going to create so many jobs, neither of your communities can handle the growth. You're both going to need new subdivisions, new housing, new expansions to your school, new recreation facilities. It's going to be amazing. So work together because we only want to pay the taxes. You guys figure out how to share it so you can both grow because one of you can't handle the growth alone. And she said, I'll be back in a year and a half with the engineering diagrams and we can get going. And she left. Well, I don't know who did what to who in 1922, but those 2 communities hated each other. Like, I think somebody gave somebody else a hip check in hockey and never got a penalty for it 100 years ago. Yeah, I was in Canada, so hockey. But they hated each other. One community wrote a letter to the other one saying, we deserve this. The other one wrote a letter and said to the newspaper and said, we deserve this more. So the other one wrote a letter and said, you guys are horrible. The other one wrote a letter to their newspaper and said, you guys are worse. And it just escalated. It was like a little mini war. In fact, the CAO showed me letters that she got from the communities. One community had written a letter saying, you don't want to do business with those guys. They'll gouge you. They're crooks. Like, they'll lower the taxes. You build, then they'll jack them up. They're crooks. So the other one had written a letter and it said, you don't want to do business with those guys. None of your employees are going to want to live there. Their school's full of drugs and their housing prices are overinflated. Your employees want to live with us, build with us. And it went on. I don't know how many letters they wrote because that's all she showed me. I don't even know why she showed up a year and a half later, but she did. She called another town hall meeting. Hundreds of people showed up. Same thing. But this time, there was a nice 10-foot swath down the middle that was vacant of people. It was no man's land in their war. One community over here, the other over here. And she said, tell me what you figured out. And they started to say, we're a great community, build with us. We're a great community, build with us. No, we're better. No, we're better. No, you guys are horrible. You guys are, I'm not joking. I watched grown adults stand up and start yelling at each other. I was sitting right here at the table as an observer. I called her a year and a half ago just to reminisce about it. I said, could you believe people did that? She said, I'm more surprised that it only took 8 minutes. I thought it was half an hour before they were yelling at each other. 8 minutes before they were yelling at each other because they were so heated. But I remember sitting there, she stood up, and everyone sat down like, ooh, we're going to figure out who won. She's going to tell us now. This is going to be great. I hope we're victorious. And she looked at the room, and all she said, and I was sitting right there, so I swear, she looked out and said, what in the hell is wrong with you people? She said, we're going somewhere else. And she got up and left, and that was it. And I felt bad for them. I did. I thought, this is horrible. What kind of situation is this? So I went and looked back, and no word of a lie, It was in 1922 when they chased away the first industry because they were fighting with each other, so that neither of them got it. See, if they would have said nothing, she would have located the business there, and then they would have fought about the taxes. They might have formed an agreement later. But the fact that they fought made sure neither of them got it. It's kind of like, if I can't have it, you can't have it either, and that's great. They were both 3,000 people, and now one is just over 600 people, and the other one is just under 600 people. And if you ask them, what's the problem? What's the cause that keeps making you fail? They will say, the province doesn't support us. The federal government doesn't give us anything. We can't get any industry out here. But every single time they have, and I found over 20 examples from 1922 forward, they have chased every single industry and business out of that community and still blame each other instead of themselves. So look, if you want to kill your community, oh, sorry, I'm not done with that one yet. I was jumping ahead. Sorry, you know what that's based on? Artificial lines in the sand between municipalities. Artificial lines that were drawn 100, 150, 200 years ago around here, I'm sure. Some of them might be not quite that old, but in Alberta, they're 100, 120 years old. What was the world like 120 years ago when they built these lines? We rode a horse to go to town. We would take our goods in and we would bring supplies out. Our education was based on how long it took a kid to walk to a one-room schoolhouse and back. That's where we built them. Our healthcare was based on how long it took a man, because it was always a man that back then, with a little black bag to come out and tell you were going to die. What they were going to do with a little black bag, I don't know. But that was our healthcare. Everything changed, and those lines were drawn because that's how far a politician could go to talk to you about your issues and get back. That's 100 years ago. The world now, I know what's going on all over the world faster than my grandpa knew what was happening in town 7 miles down the road in the 80s. I mean, we used to get off the road with a grain truck full of wheat, 3-ton Ford overcab. We used to get off the road and we had this game. It was 7 miles to Coronation, 8 miles to Fleet, 2 different grain elevators. We didn't know what the prices were. So he had a penny he would flip and I would call heads or tails and it would decide whether we went left or right. Because we didn't have a phone to call in the field in the 80s. You just that's not that long ago. And now the world has changed dramatically. We're doing online healthcare, online education. You can order something and it'll be at your doorstep from almost anywhere in the world in a few days. And what are we doing? We're still fighting about artificial lines that were drawn 100 years, like the enemy is on the other side. We're defending little fiefdoms and little kingdoms as though we're little chieftains that are supposed to keep this raw. This is about ego and not about serving constituents, not about serving people. And so, don't cooperate is usually about, unless I'm most important. And ego kills. And if your community is focused on a few egos rather than its own success, you might as well die now. If you want to kill your community, don't cooperate. Remain fiercely independent and focused on yourself, and I guarantee you'll die alone. Number 8, live in the past. There are 5 acronyms I'm going to give you. Now, just note each one gets crazier, okay? So they start off okay, then they get really crazy at the end, okay? First one, NIMBYs. Have you heard of these? NIMBYs. NIMBY stands for Not in My Backyard. Now, I've seen NIMBYs all over the place. I was in and here's the story about how it happens. You're in a community and you've decided you need seniors appropriate housing. So the leadership finds the plot of land to build seniors appropriate housing. And then they read chapter 6, don't paint, and they're like, well, we can't leave it ugly. Let's put some trees and some grass there and beautify it while we're working. We got to get government grants and find private developers and figure out what kind of housing we need. We got a few questions to answer. It'll take a year or two. So they plant some trees and grass. Things are nice. It's pretty. And then 2 years goes by and they're ready to go and they go to build and people go, that's my backyard. No, that's my nice green space. I don't want that there. And these people are okay because they're rational enough. They're like, I know you need seniors appropriate housing, just not there. Put it somewhere I can't see it because that's my backyard. So you go from available land, which is green space to green space to green space. Everyone goes, no, that's my backyard. And so you have no place to build it. NIMBYs. Then you have bananas. Banana stands for build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Banana. And I was in a community in Canada, and it was a resort community much like yours is. Beautiful. It had a long beach. It was a beautiful location. And so they said, our economy's suffering. We need some help. Come in and do an assessment. So I went to the community. I assessed it. I said, here's your problem. Your housing is really, really expensive. Like the average house price was $600,000 or just over that. It was crazy. I mean, it was Canadian dollars, so it's not quite the same as, we always laugh, you guys have real money, we have, anyway, don't print that. So I said, that's really expensive. It's really hard for people to afford to buy a house, so it's challenging. And what you've got is that people are commuting to work in your community, but when they find a job in their own hometown where they're at, they stop commuting and they stay there because it's affordable and now they don't have to pay gas. And we know what gas is doing these days. And so business owners are getting tired and frustrated and they're not open as much because they don't want to be open 18 hours a day, 7 days a week when you're a resort community and things are doing really well. So they start to shut down more. Businesses aren't open in the evening. Sometimes they're not open at all during the day. And some of them are just closing permanently. And those permanent businesses are causing people to have to commute somewhere else, so more money is leaving the community, and it's creating this vicious circle where fewer and fewer people can afford to live here to work, so they're not. Business owners are shutting down because they're wealthy and they don't want to run it all the time, and now people are starting to not just commute to go get the services, because businesses are like services. If you don't have a swimming pool, people go somewhere else to go for swimming lessons. If you don't sell insurance, then someone else goes somewhere else to buy insurance. It's just, they're important no matter what you're doing. So people are commuting, and now they're tired of commuting, so they're starting to move because your main street's dead. This is what's coming. And they said, no, I disagree. And I said, look, you can solve this by having, this was my mistake, affordable housing. One of the counselors looked at me and said, affordable housing, those people, you know what they're like. They have too many kids and too many dogs and they don't mow the lawn. It's going to ruin the motif of our community. No. So I left. What else was I going to do? They called me a couple years later and said, it's getting really bad. Businesses are closing on Main Street and it's dying. Help us. So I went back. I did the assessment again. I told them, look, everything I said is still true. The challenge you have, and instead of saying affordable housing, I said you need housing affordability and diversity. You need 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments people can rent and condos they can buy, and you need duplexes. You need a diversity of housing so that you can accommodate all sorts of people in different lifestyles, not just workforce, but young people that don't want to buy a house ever. Young people that have no plans on having kids, so they don't need a backyard or want a backyard. Older people who never had kids, who want a condo. Older people whose kids came home because they got divorced and now they need a place for them. Like, you've got all sorts of people who need different kinds of housing. That's what you need. And they said, no, thank you. So I left again. And the irony is their main street is pretty much dead. Their tourism has dried up because there's no services to offer there. And so people are starting to leave the community. And there's a lot of houses on the market and the housing prices are dropping now. So pretty soon they're going to have affordable housing anyway, right? Whether they like it or not, that's what happens. And so those are, you've got NIMBYs, you've got bananas. The next up, you've got NOPEs. NOPE stands for not on planet Earth. And these people are dangerous because their beliefs have become like a religion. Now, I got no problem with religion. The essence of religion is that it's based on faith. There's no facts one way or the other, so it's your faith. Great. Except religion is about the only thing that's like that. Everything else has evidence and facts and information. But now we've got to a point in society where people are picking their own facts, and they don't care, which is kind of ridiculous. Now, look, I'm from Alberta. We have the oil sands, right? We produce a lot of oil, a lot of natural gas, and so I know how important it is. I also got my honors degree in environmental ethics and the economy, so I understand and appreciate the environment. So I have friends on both sides who want the oil sands and those who want a clean environment. And my notion is that somehow we have to find a balance and transition, because you can't do it overnight. I argue with my environmental friends, and I say, look, the oil sands and coal, things like that, we still need to utilize some. We can't just shut them all down right away. And they're like, no. Like, no, seriously, hear me out. The windmills are made out of steel. Steel's made in a smelting plant. A smelting plant runs on coal. You can't make the steel and have your windmills without some coal until we figure out new technology, which I guess they just did a few months ago. But until then, we still need them. They're like, nope. That's why I call them nopes, not on planet Earth. They don't want to talk about transition, about facts, about information, and find a real solution. Their belief in this has become like a religion that is incontrovertible despite the facts that might be out there. And then on the other side, I've got oil sands friends too, who are like, this environmental stuff is a hoax, there's no such thing as global warming. Well, the environment is changing. It's a fact. You can disagree whether or not it's man-made, but we need to do something or our kids are going to starve to death because we're desertifying so much of the land. Nope. I'm like, no, we've got some real issues to deal with. Nope. And both sides have gone to these extremes of saying nope, because they're right and everyone else is not just wrong, but evil. And that's the nature of all of our debates today, all of our politics. I'm right and your other side is evil. Well, I remember, I don't know where I fit in the political spectrum anymore, but I remember I'm sort of on the right side of the spectrum. I used to go have beers with folks in our legislature who were on the left side of the spectrum, and we used to debate and philosophize and have a beer and have lunch and talk. We got along. Now they won't even look at each other. They won't even say, well, you actually raised one good point. No, you're evil if you're not in our party. You're evil if you're not on my side. You're evil if you don't take a stand with me. What the hell? It sounds like a kindergarten class. What happened to rational debate and thought? And so those are the nopes. And then you've got the cave people. Citizens against virtually everything. And they're even less rational, and they don't show up when you're discussing what you need to do or find solutions. I volunteered when I was doing my MBA for a community that was having a budget crunch, and I said, yeah, let me practice. I'm going to put my MBA skills to work on your budget. So I had a bunch of meetings with the public to talk about stuff. I tried to organize what some of the solutions would be, and it was kind of funny. I interviewed the two people who worked in the office. They were older ladies and they said, I don't need this job. I'm doing this for the town. Now the town office was open Monday to Thursday, and I'd calculated if it was open Monday and Thursday, the budget would be balanced. Great, they didn't need it open that often, it was a small town. So I proposed that, people were like, yeah, that's a good idea. Table by table, that's a great idea. Went to the big town hall where everyone has to confirm it after, and that's when the cave people showed up. They always do, and they showed up right at the front, and I said, we're gonna have the office open Monday to Thursday, it'll balance the books, and they said, you can't do that. What if I have to go into the office Tuesday afternoon? I'm like, well, I mean, what if you don't? I mean, it'll balance the books. Do you have another solution? They said, So I was like, okay, well, what if we'll just go with the status quo now until I can come up with another solution? They said, well, you can't do that because we're going to run up a debt and we can't afford to do that. You've got to figure this out now. So the solution I proposed didn't work, and staying with what we were doing didn't work. And I said, well, we could raise taxes to pay for it in the interim so that you don't run up a debt. And they're like, you can't do that. Like, do you have any solutions whatsoever? And they said, no, they're just there to be opposed to everything. Cave people live in the dark and they refuse to see the light. They just go deeper and deeper in opposition to everything. So you've got NIMBYs, bananas, nopes, and cave people. And then you've got the last one, the fears. FEARS stands for fire up everyone against reasonable solutions. The first four groups will tell you why they're opposed to something. They'll say, I don't like that. This group of fears is not happy with that. They want to make sure everyone else in the room is also opposed, and they do it by spreading fear. I was at a community meeting. We were going to do some feedback on what the future of the community would be. We had 300 people in the room. Again, we were going to do 60 questions in 60 minutes. It was going to be great. We were using a tool called Poll Anywhere so that people logged on with their phone. The question popped up, everyone voted. Everyone could see the results immediately. I hate those sticky note exercises consultants do. I also hate consultants. I know, that always gets a good laugh. That, only second to my lawyer joke, but I didn't do that one today. Sorry to lawyers. I need you guys, so let's... So it was set up 60 questions in 60 minutes. I had the town council lined up here. I had the Chamber of Commerce lined up here. We were ready to go. Everyone was logged on. And then a man at the back stood up and said, no, I refuse to work with council. They lost $54,000 in a corrupt deal. They lost taxpayers' money. I won't work with them. And he got up and left. I was like, thank you for your contribution. Let's get back to work. Except I could tell instantly I was losing the room. is people were saying, what $54,000? Who spent that money? Who approved this? Who got the money? What was the deal on? No one had any answers, and the noise level was going up. And I went over to the mayor and said, what's he talking about? And the mayor said, I have no idea. So I said, you should tell people. So the mayor got up to the mic and said, ladies and gentlemen, I have no idea what he's talking about. But you know politics in this day and age. People said, liar, cover up, tell us the truth, what are you hiding? So I sat him down because I was a little scared people were going to shoot him. And it was Texas, so, you know. So I got everyone back together, and I said, look, I'm going to find out what he's talking about. But by the time I got them calmed down, we lost all our time. We didn't do one of those 60 questions in 60 minutes. The time was up, and so they left. Now that guy went to the coffee shop, and half the room went after and said, you're our guy. You're going to keep these crooks honest. You keep us informed. We'll be watching. And he felt empowered. Right? And that's what he wanted, was to make everyone distrust the people in the room and then trust him because he had spread that half-truth and misinformation. And it was half-truth. He was kind of telling the truth. Literally, council had invested $54,000 in a high-risk venture. They were trying to stimulate the economy and do something because the economy was dying. That town was in despair, and they had to do something. It wasn't a corrupt deal. It just didn't pan out and didn't work out. So they lost the $54,000. He was right. What he didn't tell them was that it was in 1972. And I remember that because that's the year I was born. It stuck in my mind after that. 1972. I mean, I went and checked, and everyone who was on council and part of that decision was dead. There wasn't even anyone left alive to say, I'm sorry it didn't work out. But he didn't want an apology. He didn't want it fixed. He wanted people to be angry and distrusting, which is why he left that part out. And it worked. That half of the people that went to him and said all that gave him cause, and he decided to run for mayor. He's like, I'm going to leverage this. Ran for mayor, spread more half-truths and more misinformation everywhere he went. If you guys caught on to him, he would make something up about you and tell them, and then make up something about you and tell them. So you were so busy fighting with each other, you didn't even know he started it, and it distracted you. He ran out of misinformation and started to just come up with complete and utter lies. And one lady, they told me that, because I wasn't there obviously, they were in the final debate before the vote. It was a couple weeks before the vote, and they were having a candidates debate. One brave young lady stood up and said to him, why are you doing this to us? You are tearing this community apart. All you want is power. You are ripping us to shreds so that everybody hates everybody. For what? So you can be powerful? And he looked at her, and I guess he made up something about her personal life right there on the spot. And half the room were his followers and said, yeah, I heard that about her. And the other half said, what the hell is going on? And almost ruined her. She apparently was very suicidal for quite a while. But he did not care. He was out for power. And that is becoming a big part of politics and a big part of leveraging people to be on your side. Those first four were dangerous in their own right because they usually have selfish opinions. That one is incredibly dangerous because they're spreading fear, which is catching like wildfire, and it will destroy our community. So look, if you want to kill your community, give a microphone and give power to any of those five groups. The NIMBYs, the Bananas, the Nopes, the Caves, or the Fears. And they will make sure that you never have time to talk about real solutions, that you never come together as a team to work out solutions, and that you're never talking about your future. They'll make sure you're focused on the past and what's wrong, and then pretty soon your community will become part of the past. Number 9, shut out your seniors. People get this impression that seniors are this cordial, easygoing group. They're dangerous. They are. They are. You think for the last 60 years, they built your community. And most of the time, they did it without grants or without program funding. They just did it themselves. I still remember being barely able to stand up. And my grandpa was using our hammer on the farm to help build the curling rink. I don't curl, so don't label me with that. Not that it's a bad thing. I'm just not a curler. But he did it. I know you can't do it now because of safety guidelines and regulations and stuff, but those people were community builders. Now, I know they retire and then they want to enjoy life. And they they go off and have some fun, right? They want to travel and they want to do some golf. My grandpa, when he retired from the farm, he and his girlfriend of 25 years, my grandma died when I was very young, before I was born actually, I just didn't want you to think, he had a girlfriend on the side. I don't want to start a rumor. So he and Gert went to a little place outside of Phoenix, Arizona to retire for 6 months of the year. And you know why they picked this little community, Apache Junction? Do you know why they picked it? Because it had square dancing. I didn't get it. I mean, I went down to visit them, and I tell you, I had my butt pinched a lot. There are some frisky older ladies out there, I'll tell you what. But I didn't see it. And when they didn't go to the U.S. anymore to retire part-time, they didn't come back to the farm. They went to this little town called Viking, Alberta. And do you know why they picked Viking? Because it had square dancing. That's what they like to do. Now, of course, they want a quality life. They've worked their whole lives. Most of them were what I refer to as the STPs, the same 10 people. They sat on town council or county council, the Economic Development Authority, the Chamber of Commerce. They volunteer at the basketball court, they volunteer at the school, and they put the chairs away at church. Like, they're doing everything. Don't confuse them with the STPs that are the NIMBYs, Nopes, Banana Cave people and fears, right? There's those same 10 people that complain all the time. I don't mean them. I mean the community volunteers. And so when they retire, they're ready to enjoy life. But when they're done golfing and traveling and enjoying life and they come back, which they always do, they want to have a meaningful life. Once you're a community volunteer like them, you're always a community volunteer. And lots of communities have actually made great volunteer groups by pulling those seniors together so they can socialize and help their community. And they organize that. But I have actually heard people say, no, I don't want her involved. She was such a community leader, and if she gets back involved, everyone's going to listen to her, and it's my turn to be the boss, he said. That happens all the time. You need them to be involved, and you want them to be involved. Now, people who hear this say, yeah, okay. But Doug, I'll tell you what, I'm not doing square dancing, and I'm not worrying about their social enterprise and stuff. That's not my job. But then they say to me, you know what, the one thing I do agree with you about seniors, they need a place to live. They don't normally want to live in the same house. They want a condo, so they don't have to shovel the snow and mow the lawn and do the maintenance, and they can lock it up and go away for 4 months on a cruise. So I agree with you. We should build some housing for them. And so they do. And they get the impression they'll get together, get a grant, get a private partner or something, and they'll build this nice seniors housing complex, and those seniors will go in and play shuffleboard and crib until they die. No, they'll sneak out. They will, and they'll volunteer in your community, and they'll create social enterprise, and they'll do things to make your community better because it's in their nature. If you really want to kill your community, don't even have a quality place for them to live. And then they'll have to go somewhere, like Phoenix, Arizona, like California, like Florida, or like Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Lancaster, Pennsylvania has been #1, I think 6, maybe 7 years in a row now for a retirement community for seniors, and it's been in the top 5 for at least 7 years. And you know what? It's in Pennsylvania. It's cold. It's this far from Canada. We all want to come down where it's warm. So I don't quite understand it, but I did some research. Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the Rust Belt, lost their coal industry, lost their steel industry. All the young people left because those jobs were gone. They said, what are we going to do? So, well, we've got a hefty seniors population. Let's provide quality of life services to them. So they were creative. They pulled a bunch of people together. They had a matrix of 6 different measures that they used around quality of life, jobs, housing, employment, all that stuff. And so they undertook things like having, we call it pick and collect. One of the first places where seniors could call into a grocery store and make their order, and the groceries would be available for pickup or dropped off. And so they did the drop off first, and it was just a partnership. And then they got a bunch of high school students that were underemployed and helped partner so that they could deliver the groceries. It extended later to the pharmacy to deliver drugs for them. Pharmacy drugs. Maybe it was others. I don't know. And it worked really well. Then instead of building bicycle trails, they added more walking trails, and then they added lanes for golf carts. Only from the time the snow melts to the time the snow comes back, so they could drive golf carts between neighborhoods and between golf courses. They created more community gardens. They converted their tennis courts to pickleball courts. And they were, I think they're still planning on having it stop because of the pandemic, but they're bringing back the international pickleball tournament and you Americans are funny because no Canadians are invited to this. Like you guys, everything you have that's like world championship, you only invite yourselves. We laugh about that all the time. It's like, if you're scared to let us play. No, I'm just joking. So they're going to have the World Pickleball Championship. And what they didn't do this on purpose, but all these seniors who watched these new services and these amenities grow that made them love their community, they still left in the winter, because it is Pennsylvania, to Arizona, California, and Florida. And they bragged about what Lancaster, I was giving a presentation, I thought it was like Burt Lancaster, so I was saying Lancaster. And then a lady from Lancaster said, honey, she called me honey. Said so I'll never forget that. So they would go say, guess what Lancaster is doing for us? And they'd say, well, this is interesting. My town isn't doing anything for me. So when in the summer, instead of going home, lots of them started to go visit their friends in Lancaster and see what was there, brag about it. Lots of them started to buy places. The community started to blossom and grow, create a little mini economic boom. With more seniors coming, developers showed up to build seniors appropriate housing, which brought trades in, and the trades created another mini housing boom. And then a bunch of young entrepreneurs showed up to revitalize Main Street and open new businesses. And Lancaster now has the most vibrant young professionals association in the entire Rust Belt. It's not perfect. Not one story I tell you about any community is perfect failure or perfect success, because you're not done. Don't ever say we're done or you're going to fail again. It's just success in progress. And so they're doing great things. So look them up. I think that they're an amazing potential success story if you're interested in talking about seniors. But hey, if you want to kill your community, forget that seniors can be an economic driver. Just abandon that notion. Consider them a cost. Try and warehouse them so they go in someplace and play shuffleboard and crib until they die. Even better yet, don't give them anything, and then they have to go somewhere else, and they'll take all their money and their appreciation for your community with them. And since they are the people that laid the foundation for your community, when they leave, the foundation of your community will crumble and your whole house will come down upon itself. Number 10, reject everything new. This is water tower thinking. I call this water tower thinking because when I was a brand new MLA, a new politician, I was working on the rural development strategy, traveling everywhere. My parents were still on the farm. My mom was a travel agent. I was a teacher, so I could subsidize my ranching habit. My mom was a travel agent to subsidize the ranching habit, right? Did well at it. And she said, you look exhausted. It was October. You look exhausted. If you don't take a holiday, you're coming to Mexico with your dad and I and our friends. Like, we'll book you in. And what else would a young, single, 29-year-old man want than to go to Mexico with his mom and dad? It was going to be... So I said I'd book something, and I forgot. So I got there at Christmas to say hello, and they handed me an envelope that had a ticket to go to Mexico in it, and the bill. They weren't paying for it. They just said I was going. But I thought, I get along great with my folks. It's going to be fun. Their friends are fun. I'm going to go. So we went at Christmas, and we all had fun except one of my dad's friends. His name is Ron. Ron knows I tell this story. Ron hated everything about Mexico. He hated the Mexican food. He hated the Mexican beer. He hated the Mexican music. He hated the Mexican language. He hated the Mexican sun, the Mexican beach, the Mexican water, the Mexican chairs, the Mexican bed, the Mexicans. I've never heard one man complain so much in my entire life. And I asked my dad, what is wrong with him? And my dad said, you've got to understand. And this is what he said. He's never been out of sight of the water tower. And I could picture Ron loading up his family and getting ready and driving out of town, looking in the rearview mirror. Oh, can't see the water tower. That's as far as we go today. And Ron admitted he, being on the farm, never left town, never went very far. And so he hated it. Now he's got used to traveling. They've been all over the world. But oftentimes we keep our thoughts within sight of the water tower because we don't want something new. How many times have you heard someone say, and this is an argument against doing something, but we've never done that before? That's the point. I mean, Einstein describes insanity as doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results every time. But so many communities say, no, we're not doing that. That's new to us. You've got to try something new. And it doesn't have to be something so completely brand new. In fact, there are rural development institutes all over North America, just about one in every single state, I think, that celebrates stories of rural development success that communities have. Communities put on their websites what they've done to solve a problem because it's part of their marketing strategy if they're smart. And so you don't have to do something brand new, just something new to you. You've got to try something. The best example I have was a friend of mine in university. We both went to university. We failed out. We had a lot of fun, but we failed out that first year. Went to college. I went back to university. He didn't. He said, he came down for spring break. We have reading week. You guys have spring break. They overlap by a weekend. So everyone was partying down in the US, and he caught the weekend, and then everyone left, and he was in the town by himself for another week with no students or anything. So he went down, had fun. When all the students left, he looked around and thought, this town has the same population as mine, same economic base as mine. That's why he went there. It's very similar to mine. It's a fun town. It's a great place. And one business he noticed was very profitable and very successful, and it wasn't in his hometown. So he came back, said, hey, let's quit school and go open this business. And I was like, no, I already failed once. My parents will kill me. So I stayed in school. And he cashed out the rest of his tuition, opened the business, put his name on it, and it was a thriving success. In fact, I don't know how many he's got. Last I checked, he had close to a dozen different businesses. Not the same one. He actually picks a few communities he wants to do business in, finds similar communities that are economically prosperous, and finds businesses that have already been proven to succeed, and then puts them in those communities. And he's never failed. And I remember him saying to me, Doug, our parents always told us to learn from our mistakes. Our profs in university always told us to learn from other people's mistakes. No one ever told us, learn from other people's successes and avoid the mistakes altogether, because that's what he did. And he's way wealthier than I'll ever be, but he's still a friend, so he always buys supper. But you don't have to come up with something brand new. You just have to be willing to try something you've never done before and to take a risk. And to me, risk is the number one issue here. I can't tell you how many communities we say, this is the plan. We've done a strategic plan. This is where you're going to go forward. And then the community comes out. I mean, they don't do it with us anymore because we have a communication strategy, but they say, oh, I'm afraid. It sounds risky. What if it fails? I remind them all the time. If you try, you have a chance of succeeding. You have a chance of failing. If you do nothing, failure is guaranteed. Because most of our communities are not deliberately planning what they want to be. They're taking what comes at it, and that's not a plan for success. That's actually mistaking good luck for good planning. And good luck is not a plan, because it'll run out. So if you want to kill your community, reject everything new. Just keep doing what you've always done, and you'll always get what you've always got. Chapter 11, ignore your outsiders. So I talk about a lot of different groups for this. Normally when I'm in a presentation and there's a diverse audience like NACO or something where there's 2,000 people and they're all from different communities, I like that because then there's some anonymity. So I say, how many people have a welcoming community? And all the time, half the room puts their hand up. So I look at the ones that didn't put their hand up and I say, you should be embarrassed. And they're like, yeah, we know. And then I look at the other half who put their hand up and I say, and you guys are a bunch of liars. Because you're a friendly community. We mistake welcoming for friendly. We're friendly in my town. Man, I have waved at people I don't know, mostly because I mistook them for somebody else. But, we always do that. Oh, I thought that was Bob. No, who was it? I don't know who that was, right? We do that. If someone stops and asks you directions, you tell them where the restaurant is, you tell them where to go. We're friendly. We're not chasing people out of town with sticks. We're friendly. But welcoming means taking some of those new people that have come into the community and saying, hey, come on over for a barbecue. Hey, what do your kids like to do? Hey, what are you interested in doing? Let me connect you with somebody. That's being welcoming. Because actually, in every community, there are about 100 other sub-communities on average. And all of us belong, on average, to about a dozen sub-communities. I belong to the community of consultants. I don't like them, but I'm kind of in that group. I belong to a community of people who are dads whose boys play soccer. I don't like them either. No, I'm just joking. I quite like them. They're crazy though. My wife's Portuguese. Man, I didn't play hockey because I thought it was going to be crazy. Whoa, I had no idea soccer could be, it's worse. So I belong to multiple subgroups. We all do. And we can go about with those groups and not even see newcomers in the community and help bring them in. You've got to deliberately find them and break down some of those barriers, or they'll feel like they're on the outside. and they'll stay on the outside. In fact, we have names for them. I was speaking in Prince Edward Island in Canada. It's a small province. It's the Atlantic thing. You guys ever hear of the Broadway show Come From a Ways? Okay, it's a Newfoundland term. Our farthest east province out in the ocean where the Titanic bodies are now buried. Yeah, it's just a little trivia fact. So I don't even understand what they say most of the time, but I do know the phrase come from a ways. And so when 9/11 happened, all those jets that were stuck in the air landed in Gander, Newfoundland, and this small little community helped take care of all these people on planes. Thousands of them. Now, I thought that was just the name of the Broadway play until I was speaking in PEI, and after I was done the presentation, a lady stood up and said, I'm an outsider. They call me a come from a ways. Like, they don't even hide it. It's like, you come from somewhere else. That's what I'm a come from a ways. I'm saying, oh, that's challenging. What's it like? She said, well, every time I speak up about the community, they say to me, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know our history. You don't know our background. You don't know anything about us yet. You be quiet until you've been here a while. Like, oh, that's horrible. How long have you been there? She said, 24 years. No word of a lie. And all her friends put their head down like, yeah, we do that. And so I actually did a survey across Canada and did some research. And in most every small town, I'm pretty sure the US will be the same, your parents have to have been born there for you to really be considered a local insider. Right? And so that's 3 generations. You arrive, you have to have kids, and then their kids will finally be local insiders. Well, why? What is the qualification for being an insider that makes you so much better? I mean, it amounts to, I fell out here. How does a birth certificate make you more of an expert on your community than anybody else? Especially when outsiders deliberately picked your community on purpose. I mean, they literally moved there on purpose. You were there by default. Maybe you're too scared to leave. Maybe you're comfortable. They left things to move there on purpose, for a job, to raise their family, to do something. And so they have some insight on the amazing things that your community has because they have outsiders' eyes and outsiders' perspective. I mean, we often as insiders don't see things that we've seen for a long time. When I was feeding cows, I drove the same road every year for 16 years. And I didn't, one day, I noticed something had changed, but I couldn't put my finger on it. My dad didn't know what I was talking about until we went down the road together. And then he noticed, he said, you mean that old barn? I'm like, there's no barn there. He said, I know, we took it down yesterday. But that barn had been there for 16 years, but I quit seeing it because I saw it so much. It's like becoming nose blind when you're a fisherman to the smell of fish. You just kind of can't smell it anymore. You can't see it anymore. And when you're an insider, you fail to see the things that outsiders see. And that is so valuable and so important. And old barn, it's not just the old barn that I didn't see. You've all seen a couple at a wedding dance, the old man and his wife standing there at the wedding dance. He doesn't want to dance. He doesn't really want to talk. He's just kind of bored with the whole situation, so he's hanging out. She's standing beside him a lot. And he doesn't pay much attention until he sees another old guy across the room and looking at his wife. Well, then the arm comes out and, right, she's with me. Because we don't appreciate what we have often until someone else appreciates what we have. And it often takes an outsider to really see what's out there. These people add immense value to show you what makes your community amazing. But most of the time, we shut them out and say, you be quiet until you think like we do. But you exactly want them not to think like you. You need an outside perspective to tell you what makes your community amazing. But hey, if you want to kill your community, just leave the outsiders on the outside. And eventually they may become so tired with being shut out that they'll go somewhere else. And then you can have the inside tracked on failure. Number 12, become complacent. This is the old tortoise and the hare argument. You guys know that story, right, from childhood? The tortoise and hare were going to have a race. The hare thought, oh, I'm definitely going to win this. I'm so much faster. Lay down to have a nap. And the tortoise won because the hare didn't wake up in time, right? So many communities become complacent, thinking they're so far ahead of everybody else and that they don't need to do anything anymore. And then they wake up and they're in last place, so the race is already over. And I can tell when communities are doing this because most of them want a sustainability strategy. That's what they deliberately ask for, to be sustainable. Now, I hate that word. I would like to ban it from everything community building, not because it's a bad word, but because it's abused. Whenever I talk to people who use the word sustainable, they don't mean sustainable. They mean status quo. right? Like a giant safety meeting. Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. Let's just keep things the way they are, except they never stay the way they are. If you try and stay exactly the way you are, one business will close, I guarantee you. And that business closes, and then there are 13 unemployed people. And those 13 people will have to go find a job somewhere else, and they will take their families. And when they take their families, they're gone. 13 families not spending money means less volunteers in your community, less kids in your school, less utilization in your healthcare, less money spent. 13 families not spending that money could cause another business to close, which is 13 more unemployed people, which means 13 more families that need to leave, which means fewer volunteers in your community, less kids in your school, less utilization of your healthcare, less. You see how it starts to suddenly spiral out of control because it compounds all the time? Instead of using sustainable, I encourage everyone to use words like vibrant, dynamic, responsive, aggressive, enterprising, adaptive, anything that says you're going to do something about your community. Have a vibrant, aggressive housing strategy. Have a dynamic, responsive youth entrepreneurship strategy. But do something that says you're going to take action in your community. And then, if you're lucky, a new business opens. And that's 13 new jobs created. I just picked that because it's the title of the book. It might be 20. That's 13 new people that could move to your community for those jobs. And guess what they bring? They bring their families. More kids in your school, more utilization in your healthcare, more volunteers in your community, 13 families spending money could mean another business opens. 13 new jobs, 13 more families, more volunteers, more utilization of your hospital, more kids in your school. You see how it spirals up? And you need to do that just to be sustainable, because odds are when you open one business, one will close. It takes hard work to stay here. Sustainability strategies are about hard work, not about safety meetings where nobody moves and nobody gets hurt. That's wrong. You need to be aggressive just to stay where you are. So if you want to kill your community, grow complacent. Forget that you need to work at it. And your community, I say this, I've only used this once and it was really quiet. I said, if you really want to kill your community, grow complacent. Lay down and have a nap. It'll become a dirt nap. And people are like, ooh, that's harsh. So I got to come up with a new one for that. And the last one, number 13, don't take responsibility. It's just that easy. In order to make sure your community dies, don't take personal responsibility for it. But that means you have to give responsibility to somebody else. And anyone else will do. Because if you feel responsible for your community, you have to fix it. You're just naturally compelled when you feel responsible. So get rid of that responsibility. But let's clarify something. The words blame and responsible are two different words for a reason, and they're often confused. So I hear people all the time say, I'm not responsible for the crisis in fisheries. I'm not responsible for the war that's creating accelerated gas prices. I'm not responsible for Biden's policies or the governor's strategy or our economic development team or whatever. I'm not wrong. Wrong. You are. As much as you think you aren't. You're not to blame for those, but you're responsible for them. I mean, think of it this way. I'm your boss, and I'm a horrible human being, and 6 months into our contract, I just fire you for no reason, right? You're not to blame because I'm a jerk, but you are responsible for what you're going to do about it. Do you go find another job? Do you file a human rights complaint? Do you take your contract to alert? What are you going to do? And so it's the same way. You're not to blame for any of those things I listed. You're still responsible for what you're going to do about it because nobody else is, only you. We focus on the federal government and the state governments all the time to find answers. The most important thing we can do is focus on our community because we build great nations by building great communities, not the other way around. Great nations are built because we built great communities. We don't build a great nation and communities follow. It's the other way around. Both of our countries started with communities and nations were built, not the other way. And so don't take responsibility, but then you got to find someone to blame. Pick the president, the governor, ISIS, United Nations. Pick a teacher, preacher, doctor, dentist. I don't care who you pick. It really doesn't matter because none of them are as responsible for the future of your community as you are, and you, and you, and you. Every single one of you has the ability to make your community better. In fact, every single one of you is the only one that can make your community better. That's it. And if you kill your community, the way to kill your community by not taking responsibility also means that you give up your power. You give up your authority. You put your hands in somebody else to take responsibility for making your community better. Well, what a juvenile thing to do. We own our communities. We build our communities, which means we have to accept responsibility for making them better. No one else. And in my experience, in all of my experience of doing this in politics and doing this for 25 years now, I have found that a group of people that decides it's meant to fail is going to fail. In fact, a group of people that decides it's meant to fail can't be saved by God himself because they will make failure come true. But a group of people that decides they're going to succeed and believes they can succeed cannot be stopped by any government. That's the truth. And so you need to own the future of your community. And it can't be about you and your ego. It needs to be about the community. Otherwise, you're not building a community, you're building yourself. But community is not about individuals by definition. So look, one last bit. You may feel inspired, you may feel frustrated, you laughed a little bit, that's good. I got to tell you, I've been doing this for a long, long time now, and I have had everyone I have ever met at some point or another say, why do you do this? It's not going to work. And I used to get so mad at them. But anger is the most evil of all human traits, because when you're angry, you make dumb decisions. You make dumb choices. We always do when you're angry. In our household, we have a saying, your anger is a liar. If you're angry, take a breather because it's your brain's lying to you. Don't get angry when people tell you it won't work, it can't be done, it's impossible. Just look at them and smile and say, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those of us who are doing it, and then get back to work. And if you need a hand, give me a call. Thank you.